Hey guys, so a while ago I announced that I was going to do a Q&A, and you guys asked a ton of questions. I think it was close to 200 questions. And my first Q&A, I only got to answer 10 to 15 questions, so I left a lot of you guys hanging. So today is going to be part 2 of the Q&A. Alright guys, I think I found the perfect Q&A spot. If you can ask the big three one technical question, what will it be and to who? I know exactly what I would ask my favorite player of all time, Rafa. I would ask him, Rafa, why don't you go for your serve more? I remember a few years back, you were serving bombs at the US Open. You won the tournament, you were serving 130 or 135. Wouldn't it make sense now that you're older to go back to that bomb that you know you can hit? I know you love going with the slice out wide. I know you like getting that first service and getting into long rallies. I've heard you say that you like extending the rallies. It gives you a better rhythm. You don't like short points. But I think it would make a lot of sense if you try to blast that serve again and shorten the points. So this is the question I would ask Rafa, hopefully directly. Hey Nick, how do you keep yourself in good physical condition at your age and long career of playing such a demanding sport? Being injury-free and managing things like joints and muscles can be tough work. What's your secret, or can you share your approach to keeping yourself from being a broken athlete? So this is an absolutely fantastic question, and I want you guys to realize that a lot of athletes who were maybe at the top of the game, I'm not going to mention any names because that would be mean, but there were some elite level tennis players, Grand Slam champions, who immediately after they stopped playing, they ballooned up and they became kind of out of shape and overweight, quite frankly, and they don't resemble their former self. So the most important things for athletes when they stop competing, when they stop training every day, is to watch their diet. This is the #1 thing that goes wrong, because when you are a professional tennis player, you can have a diet that's very calorie rich because you're going to burn everything off. But then when you stop playing, you can't continue to eat the same way. So I would say the most important thing for former players to keep their physical shape is to watch their diet once they stop competing. Do you have an interesting anecdote on your time playing competitively? I'm sure you travel around a bit. Any locker room gossip or crazy story to share? Of course, I have so many stories. There's a lot of crazy tennis players that you will encounter if you play tennis at the high level. I can tell you a couple of stories. So there was this one high-level junior player in Germany. He was one of the best players in Germany, ranked really high. I believe he was in the top 10. And this guy was one of the worst unsportsmanlike players that I've ever seen. And this guy would grunt a lot. But when he was losing and when he was playing against somebody he hated, he would turn his grunts into expletives. So pick your favorite 4-letter word and just make that 4-letter word into a grunt. That's what this guy was doing. And one of the funniest stories was another guy who was actually an ATP level player. I'm not going to say his name, but he was in the top 200 in the world. He was from Germany, and I heard the craziest stories from this guy. One time he was at a futures tournament and it was a bad line call and he had played on clay. So what he did, he went to the line and with his racket dug up the clay like this and then brought the clay with the mark to the umpire to check it out. If you could play in and win any Grand Slam, which one and why? Cheers, Nick. So all tennis players, I don't care what level, fantasize about winning Grand Slams. I did too. But before I tell you which Grand Slam I was fantasizing about winning, let me tell you about this guy called Vince Spadea, who wrote a book called Break Point. And it's a great book. It's hilarious. And he starts off the book with his fantasy of winning the US Open. I'm not sure who he was playing in the final in this fantasy, but he won the match point and was then moonwalking to the net like Michael Jackson. And I just thought this is hilarious, and this kind of reminds me of the fantasies that I have. If I would have won The US Open, this would be my dream. Out of all the Grand Slams, I would love to win the US Open because I'm a big fan of the United States. I'm a big fan of New York. So that what I would have done in my fantasy after winning the match point, which would most likely be against Djokovic, the toughest opponent of all time, and an unbelievable like 5 or 6 hour match, 7-5 in the fifth, let's say. And I would win the match point and I would sprint up the stairs like Rocky Balboa to the top of the stadiums, and I would raise my hands looking at the city and say, "Come on!" And then I would make my way down to the court and I would of course start the USA chant. I would get the crowd behind me. I would start going, USA, USA. But I would take out an American flag, make a lap around the court, and then I would actually take out the Croatian flag. I would represent both countries. And then in my speech, I would say, even though I love the United States, I have to dedicate this Grand Slam title to the small country of Croatia. And I would say a few more things to get the crowd on my side, and then I would end the speech with a mic drop. All right, now look, this is an embarrassing thing that I just told you, but it's okay because we all have these crazy fantasies. I'm gonna tell you to watch my "Is it too late for me to turn pro" video, because there I said to stay away from these fantasies, because let's face it, when you have these fantasies, you feel really good. It's so fun to fantasize about this, but then the reality hits you. The next day, you gotta play in the first round at some garbage tournament where nobody's watching you. That's the reality, hits you in the face, and then you're like so depressed because you know that winning the US Open or even playing in the US Open is not going to happen because it's really difficult, and all of a sudden you get down and maybe you don't perform so well. So what's really important when it comes to these fantasies is to go step by step. Fantasize about winning the club championship, then the county, then the state, and then the nationals. If you do it that way, you're not only going to be more happy as a tennis player, but you're actually going to have better results. Can you substantially improve your game by practicing with players who are worse than you? So this is a really, really good question. So it's going to be difficult to improve if you always are playing against players who are worse than you. But interestingly also, if you play against players who are better than you, you're also going to have a hard time improving. The best thing that you can do is find people who are of a similar level, where it's about 50-50 whether you can win or lose. So let me explain that in a little more depth, and I'm willing to make an entire video about this topic. But when you play against someone who is a lot worse than you, your game is going to get dragged down. This is the case for anyone. When you play against someone who's substantially at a weaker level than you, your game is going to suffer as a result of it. Also, if you play against someone who's a lot better than you, you're going to get destroyed, and your game is obviously going to suffer as well. Now, from a mental standpoint, it's also real important to play against people where it's about 50-50 whether you can win or lose, because you're going to have a lot more pressure in those type of matches. So you're going to have no pressure at all playing against someone where you know you're going to win or you know you're going to lose. How much should we focus on YouTube videos for improvement? I think you should exclusively watch YouTube videos. Don't even go on the court. And when you're watching YouTube, make sure it's intuitive tennis, and make sure you smash that like button. In the age of YouTube, it's so helpful. For example, when my dishwasher breaks, I can go on YouTube and figure out how to fix it. Or if I got a flat tire, I can go on YouTube and figure out how to change my tire. Also, when it comes to tennis, there's going to be some super helpful channels, especially intuitive tennis, okay? But of course, guys, you're going to have to hit the court. That's the only way to get better. So yes, you can get some great tips on YouTube, but then you got to hit the courts. You got to practice every day. You got to get those reps in. Without those, you're of course not going to get better from sitting at home and watching YouTube videos. You got to go out there and grind. Carla asks, "Hey Nick, I've got a quick one for you. What's your favorite thing to do off the court?" So I have 3 passions in my life. My number 1 passion is tennis. My number 2 passion is nutrition. Many of you guys don't know that, but I love nutrition. I love to cook. And my number 3 passion is psychology, and it's evolutionary psychology for that matter. So those are the things that I do in my free time. I learn how to cook. I learn about nutrition. I've been doing that for 10 years, and I learn about evolutionary psychology. Also, in addition to that, I love the water. I love being on a supboard, for example. I love the sunshine. That's why I choose to live in warm climates. We know that the serve and volley game is extinct from the game at the pro level. Do you feel it should be taught at the amateur club level, adult and junior player? So, yes. Serve and volley tennis is extinct, and it's not going to come back. Now, this doesn't mean that players are going to stop serve and volleying. Every now and then, players still serve and volley, but the way it was done back in the day, where players were serve and volleying on every first serve and every second serve, that is never going to come back, simply because the ground strokes are too powerful and you have absolutely no chance at the net. In addition to that, a lot of the modern players do not put a high priority on their net game, so actually the quality of their volleys is not as good as it used to be back in the day. Now, having said that, I do think it's very important to know how to volley because, like I said, you're still going to serve and volley. Sometimes you're still going to come to the net. This is still a part of modern tennis. You're not going to be serving and volleying on every first and second serve, but you need to be able to play the net, and therefore I do teach my players volleys. I also have them work a little bit on serve and volley, but I would never force someone to serve and volley on every first serve and every second serve because that's going to be an impossibility at the high level. I got to stand up a little bit and stretch my legs. I'm getting a cramp from sitting down here. So let's go on to the next question. How important is rolling your wrist for a forehand to create topspin? So guys, please don't use your wrist to create topspin. I've made several videos about this. All you got to do, go on YouTube, find super slow motion footage, record it with your phone, and they'll go frame by frame. What you will discover, whether it's Nadal, whether it's Kyrgios, whether it's Berrettini, anybody with an incredible amount of spin, you will see that their wrist indeed is passive shortly after contact. Frame 1 is going to look like this, frame 2 is going to look like this, frame 3 is going to look like this. Absolutely no movement of the wrist at contact whatsoever. Why is this the case? Because it is humanly impossible to create a lot of power and acceleration with a small, fragile piece of the human body, such as the wrist. Naturally, we're going to use the bigger muscles. So therefore, do not use your wrist. And if you don't believe me, do the research yourself. The wrist is passive, even on Nadal and all the other guys with a lot of topspin on their forehand. Who's the most fundamentally sound player on tour? I would say, without a doubt, is Djokovic. Just look at his results. Look at the way he plays. He's the only player that's able to play mistake-free tennis. When he's on fire, he simply doesn't miss. And this is due to the fundamentals, which he has everything that you need to have as a tennis player. He has the speed, he has the agility, he has the consistency. He also has really clean technique. So in my opinion, the most fundamentally sound player on tour is Novak Djokovic. Does playing padel help with tennis technique? I would say no. Any other racket sports besides tennis, even if you're playing pickleball, I don't think it's going to help you with tennis because generally those sports have a lot shorter swing path. You're playing kind of out of your hand. The body is not as involved. As in tennis, of course, yes, it is involved. Even in ping pong, the players are using a lot of body, but it's no comparison to the amount of rotation that you're generating on a tennis stroke because the tennis stroke is much longer. Therefore, when you're shortening your stroke, when you're playing pickleball or padel, there's absolutely no way that this can help your tennis game. What do you enjoy the most out of tennis? This is an excellent question, and I know the answer. But generally speaking, for one to fall in love with tennis, I think you have to just love the fact that you're hitting a tennis ball. Novak Djokovic said, and when he had some bad results a few years back, he asked himself the question, do you actually like this game? He was pretty close to quitting, actually. And then he did realize that he likes hitting the ball when there's nobody watching, when it's just him and somebody else on the other side. He loves just hitting the ball back and forth, and I love that too. But when you ask me, what is the most enjoyable thing about tennis? It's got to be when you are playing a tough match against someone who is better than you and then winning. That feeling of winning, I can't describe it to you guys. It's as if you were walking on cloud. And the only thing that's better, if you happen to win a tournament, if your name goes all the way through the draw and you win a tournament, that feeling is absolutely unbelievable. And I think that's what we all play for, to recreate that feeling as often as possible. I have a 2-year-old son, and I was wondering if there are any tennis-specific drills or exercises for kids his age. Yes, you can do what Mike Agassi did. This is Andre Agassi's dad, and he, in Agassi's crib, mounted 2 tennis balls, and Agassi, as a little baby, was slapping these balls with his hands. I, of course, copied this because I trained my daughter, and I mounted 2 tennis balls above her crib, and she would occasionally slap them, or maybe it was by accident, and I was really happy when that happened. But you really can't do much besides that. Just have your kid play with tennis balls, or any balls for that matter, and just try to develop their motor skills that way. But in my experience, depending on the attention span of your kids, that is way too early to worry about it. You can easily wait until they're 5 or 6 years old to start playing tennis. All right, guys, I'm going to start heading back, but I'm going to get to a few more questions. Is it advisable to own multiple rackets of different specs, weight, balance, etc., and use them interchangeably whenever you play, recreationally? On a related questions, should we stick to a racket that works for us or try new rackets? The last part of that question, whether you should change rackets or stick to it, I made an entire video on that topic. I'm going to put the link in the description below. But as far as can you change two different rackets interchangeably at changeovers, this is a really good question. There has been actually a few players on tour. One is Juan Balcells. He doesn't play anymore. He used to have two different rackets, one for his serve games, one for his return games. Hold on one second, I gotta steer it a little bit. Okay, that's better. I'm going in the right direction. But another player that played with two different rackets of different kinds is Fabrice Martin, a French doubles player. He's still on tour, I believe. And he played with a Babolat Pure Arrow for his return games, I believe, and a Babolat Pure Drive for his serve game. So it is possible to play with two different kinds of rackets. It's kind of a hassle to have to interchange the rackets. But if that's something that you want to do, it can be done. Okay, next question. Why does Djokovic seem to emphasize balance and flexibility more than others? Well, that's an easy one to answer because that's the strength of his game. He's possibly the best defensive player in the history of the game. Nobody has ever defended as well as Djokovic, and he uses that to his advantage. This is why he puts so much emphasis on those parts of his body, being flexible and being agile. Now, for example, John Isner or Ivo Karlovic would put the same amount of work into their agility and flexibility. I don't think it would matter that much. Of course, anybody should do that, but to the amount that Djokovic is doing it, it wouldn't make sense to Isner and Karlovic because those players are naturally not as agile, and that's not the basis of their game. It's not defense, it's serving. So that's what those guys should put the most focus on, is their serve or whatever encompasses the service games. I'm very similar to that point where I'm not naturally very agile and very coordinated. So therefore, when I practice, I base my practice around my serve. All right guys, last question because I'm really dehydrated. I didn't bring enough water, so I have to head back, but I'll answer one more question. Are tennis techniques still evolving? So I would say yes, tennis techniques are always going to evolve. If you look at the way Federer, Nadal, Djokovic plays compared to the next gen, it's different. Next gen plays different, and the generation after next gen is going to play different. So that's what makes my job so fun. The research never ends. I can't say I did all the research and now I can stop and relax. I got to keep my eye open because naturally the game of tennis is always going to continue to evolve. All right guys, I'm gonna have to end the Q&A. I'm completely dehydrated. I got water in the car, which is right across the street here. I'm actually gonna walk back. And again, I didn't get to a lot of great questions that you guys asked, so look out for part 3 of my Q&A coming very soon. Take care guys.